The last goodbye. The morning light filtered through the weathered slats of the stable, casting long shadows across the hay-strewn floor. Sarah sat on the old wooden barrel where she had spent countless hours watching Thomas tend to the horses, her hands trembling as she held the letter that would change everything. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle nickering of the horses. He looked up from where he knelt, his calloused hands stilling on the leather harness he had been mending. The concern in his dark eyes made her heart ache even more. "What is it, darling?" He rose slowly, his movements careful as he approached her. At 28, Thomas had the weathered hands of a man who had worked the land all his life, but his touch was always gentle when it came to her. Sarah's fingers shook as she extended the letter. "It came this morning, from my father's lawyer in Boston." Thomas took the paper, his brow furrowing as he read. She watched his face change, saw the moment understanding dawned, followed quickly by a pain so deep it made her want to weep. The letter was formal, cold in its legal language, but its meaning was devastatingly clear. Sarah's father had died, leaving her his entire estate, but only if she returned to Boston immediately and married the man of his choosing, a wealthy merchant named Harrison Whitmore. "Sarah," Thomas's voice broke slightly as he looked up at her. "I have to go," she said, the words falling from her lips like stones. "If I don't, I lose everything. The estate, the money, it all goes to my cousin Edmund. And you know what kind of man he is." Thomas knelt before her then, his hands covering hers. "We'll find another way. We don't need his money." "But we do," Sarah said, tears finally spilling over. "Your mother's medicine, the debts on your family's farm, we both know we can't make it on a stable hand's wages alone. And this," she gestured around the small stable that had become their sanctuary, "this isn't really living, Thomas. We've been fooling ourselves." They had met 2 years ago when Sarah had fled Boston after her father had first tried to arrange her marriage to Whitmore. She had taken refuge at her aunt's small ranch in Colorado, where Thomas worked. What started as stolen glances had grown into a love so profound it felt like breathing, necessary, natural, irreplaceable. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself for money," Thomas said fiercely, his hands tightening on hers. "And I won't let you sacrifice your family for me," Sarah replied. "Your mother needs those treatments, Thomas. Your little sister deserves to go to school. I can't be the reason your family loses their farm." The horses shifted restlessly in their stalls, sensing the tension in the air. Thunder, the big bay gelding that had been Thomas's favorite, whinnied softly as if trying to comfort them. "There has to be another choice," Thomas said desperately. "We could go west, to California. Start over." Sarah closed her eyes, imagining it, a small house with a garden, Thomas coming home from work each evening, children playing in the yard. It was a beautiful dream, but dreams didn't pay for medicine or save farms from foreclosure. "My train leaves at noon," she said quietly. Thomas's face went pale. "Today, the will stipulates I must be in Boston within 10 days of receiving the letter. If I'm going to do this, I have to do it now, before I lose my courage." He pulled away from her then, standing and pacing to the far end of the stable. She could see his shoulders shaking with suppressed emotion. When he finally turned back to her, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Marry me," he said suddenly. "Thomas, right now, today, before you go, marry me." "Sarah," her heart shattered at the hope in his voice. "What good would that do? I'd still have to go to Boston. I'd still have to pretend to be available for Whitmore's proposal. And you'd be left here, married to a woman who might never come back." "But you'd be mine," he said fiercely. "Even if only for a few hours, you'd be mine." Sarah stood, moving to where he waited. She reached up to touch his face, memorizing every line, every freckle across his nose from years of working in the sun. "I've been yours since the moment I met you," she said softly. "A piece of paper won't change that. And it won't change what I have to do." Thomas caught her hand, pressing it flat against his cheek. "What if Whitmore is a good man? What if you could be happy with him?" The question hung in the air between them. They both knew Harrison Whitmore's reputation. He was cold, calculating, interested in Sarah only for her bloodline and the social connections her father's name could provide. "I could learn to be content," Sarah said carefully. "Many women make marriages of convenience work. But would you be happy?" Sarah looked around the stable one last time, at the shaft of sunlight illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, at Thunder's gentle eyes watching them, at Thomas's work jacket hanging on the hook by the door. This place had been their world, small but perfect. "No," she admitted, "I could never be truly happy without you." Thomas pulled her into his arms then, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. She could feel his heart racing against her chest, could smell the familiar scent of leather and hay that always clung to his clothes. Then stay, he whispered against her hair. We'll figure out the rest. For a moment, Sarah almost said yes. Almost let herself believe that love could conquer practical concerns like money and family obligations. But then she thought of Thomas's mother, growing weaker each month without the medicine she needed. She thought of his sister Mary, so bright and eager to learn but stuck in a one-room schoolhouse with no future. She thought of the farm that had been in Thomas's family for 3 generations, now mortgaged to the hilt. I can't, she said, the words breaking her heart. I love you too much to let you destroy your family for me. They held each other in the dusty stable as the morning wore on, neither wanting to be the first to let go. Outside, Sarah could hear the sounds of the ranch waking up, her aunt calling to the chickens, the other hands beginning their daily chores. Normal life continuing even as her world fell apart. Finally, Thomas pulled back to look at her. Promise me something, anything. If there's ever a chance, if anything changes, if you find a way out of this, you'll come back to me. Promise me you won't give up completely. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. And promise me you'll write. Even if you can't tell me everything, just let me know you're all right. I promise. Thomas walked her to the main house, where her trunk waited by the door. Her aunt stood on the porch, her face carefully neutral. She had disapproved of Sarah's attachment to Thomas from the beginning, not out of cruelty but from a practical understanding of how the world worked. The wagon's ready to take you to the station, her aunt said gently. Sarah nodded, then turned back to Thomas one last time. He stood with his hat in his hands, looking younger than his years. I love you, she said, the words carrying all the weight of a life they would never share. I love you too, he replied. Always. As the wagon pulled away from the ranch, Sarah didn't look back. She couldn't bear to see Thomas standing alone by the stable, couldn't bear to see the life she was leaving behind growing smaller in the distance. 6 months later, Sarah married Harrison Whitmore in a grand ceremony in Boston's most fashionable church. She wore her mother's pearls and smiled at all the right moments, playing the part of the grateful bride. But late at night, when her new husband was away on business, she would sit by her bedroom window and remember the feel of hay beneath her feet and the sound of Thomas's voice calling her name across the stable yard. Thomas never married. He used the money Sarah managed to send anonymously through a mutual friend to save his family's farm and pay for his mother's treatments. Years later, people would say he was waiting for something, though they never knew what. He kept the stable exactly as it had been that last morning, and sometimes visitors would find him there at sunset, standing in the shaft of light where he had once held the only woman he ever loved. And sometimes, on clear mornings when the light fell just right through the stable slats, he could almost see her there still, sitting on the old wooden barrel, her hair catching the sun, smiling at him as if their love were enough to conquer anything, even time itself.